Welcome back, everybody. It's the September 10th AI update for the AIX Higher Ed podcast.
Yeah, that's great to be back. And there's a lot happens every week. We're definitely kind of a really high rate of growth. Today, we're going to talk about some new developments from Apple, Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI. Just a few, and you'll see Google's got a pile. There's been some cool research that's come out. Research studies showing some new advances that have been made. There's a pretty cool little robotics thing. There's some new research, at least papers, about education and kind of a challenge to schools. OpenAI is starting their own AI training with certification for industry. And of course, we'll cover some controversies that we always like to talk about.
But first, let's talk about some of the Apple advances. And, earlier on Tuesday, there was the release of the iPhone 7. But the bigger story for our purposes is the AirPods Pro 3. And it's actually also the AirPods 4. They have new developments incorporating AI to allow for live translation, which is really pretty remarkable. And, seeing some demos of this, I can't wait to be able to try it out. The AirPods Pro 3 are $249, but they include heart rate sensing. And the live translation would allow you to hear and then translate in your ear into your own language, which is pretty remarkable and getting a little closer, further advancing the technology to real life applications.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite there. And we've seen a lot of advances from Google. We'll go through these briefly. And I know on in the big advances with NotebookLM.
NotebookLM, they just keep it. You would almost think that this is a separate AI platform, the way they're developing capabilities separate from Gemini Pro. The new developments in NotebookLM, of course, they've added now more than 80 languages that you can produce the audio overviews, the video overviews. They've also now included reporting functions so that you can actually have it report different kinds of reports. And within this, they're developing some of the study tools. So you can add flashcards and quizzes, and also included is this new custom reports feature. And they have the reports now. And I know my version doesn't show all of these capabilities, but this is something I've been trying out in beta testing. I think we'll all see it coming out pretty soon, allowing for custom reports, briefings, study guides, blog posts. And they're adding more and more granular control over all of the output from audio, video, text-based. It's pretty remarkable to see, and it's becoming a really useful tool for teachers, for students, and I think they're making it almost a one-stop shop for almost anything you would do to get ready for course assignments.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, like we say, these things can really help you accelerate your own learning. We were talking about even just simple stuff like quizzes and, improve the quality of your work.
Yeah. Google also adding some more capabilities with VO3. They're just increasing the capabilities in terms of higher resolution to 1080p, making it 9 by 16 ratio video, dropping the price in half. And so they're just continuing to fine tune this model to make it even more realistic, to have higher resolution. And we're seeing more examples of people producing short videos, movies, and also advertisements that are produced entirely with VO3 clips.
And then we see in the AI mode. So this is first with Google we had the overview. So you do the search, it would give you a little bit of AI kind of shared, and it wasn't really that accurate. But then they added Gemini Pro to Google, and you could click on AI mode, and it got a lot more accurate. Now it's coming right into the search. So when you just do a search, it's going to give you the AI mode search results similar to what you get in Perplexity, all the explanation, very high quality hyperlinks. It's like, well, where's that red traffic light anymore for when we're not supposed to use AI? It doesn't really seem to care about the red light. It's just like, if you give your students an assignment and they use Google, they're going to get AI results.
Even through last year, we really saw most of AI as being opt-in. At the beginning of the summer, through the middle of summer, it was opt-out, and now we're getting to the point where it's going to be even difficult to opt out. So many of the tools are just being integrated, and they're ubiquitous across pretty much any platform that you or your students are using.
And the reason they're doing this is because they're starting to admit, right, the open web is kind of rapidly in decline, right? That this Google where you just kind of see all the blue links and you go around and you click, right? That's just not the way it's being utilized more. I do wish, and I was encouraging some students the other day to really click on the links, right? To develop more, read more. But a lot of people aren't doing that. They're just taking the information and going. So somebody says this is a Kodak moment for Google, right? Right. Google Kodak didn't want to adapt to the digital, and they paid the price. And I think Google wants to avoid that. The other thing that's kind of cool, this is not out for everyone yet, and I haven't used it, but I've seen a couple videos and it works pretty well. You can edit any of your Microsoft product documents plus PDFs right in the chat window if you're using Anthropic. So we're starting to see kind of the integration of traditional products like word processors, PDFs, right in the tool.
And I think this is another example of platforms trying to find ways to incorporate everything within their environment so that you don't have a reason to leave. If you have the ability to do the research, generate the text, adapt it to a Word document or a PowerPoint or a PDF, then you can stay entirely within Claude and do everything in your workflow. And we're seeing this happen with ChatGPT, of course, and also with Google products, and it's just going to continue.
And the other well, with this should say ChatGPT on the left, not Google, but ChatGPT, we don't really have much new to report this week except voice mode is getting extended. And more people are going to have access to it and for longer periods of time, and you can talk with it. I still do, obviously at this point, most people, pretty much everyone I've talked to has at least used ChatGPT a little bit, but they have not all used voice mode. And when you pull out the voice mode on your phone and you just start talking to it, that kind of surprises a lot of people. And now it's just going to be common. It's going to be common. There's some interesting research, that's come out. Just a few things, and I haven't kept up with it all, but a few things that have popped out over the last few days that are pretty interesting. This popped out just today. An AI system to help scientists write expert level empirical software. And basically, they just kind of combined, LLMs with research. And, as it says, it was able to generate 14 models that outperformed the CDC ensemble of, individual models for forecasting COVID hospitalizations. It had produced software for geospatial analysis, neural activity prediction. I forgot to say at the top in bioinformatics, it discovered 40 novel methods for single cell data analysis. And that word novel is really important, right? Because people say that all it can really do is kind of repeat what it knows. It's not producing new knowledge. There was an article actually in the Wall Street Journal this weekend when somebody wrote an article about how, hey, knowledge is going to die. Like we're not going to have any new knowledge. It's not true. These things are starting to make novel advances.
Yeah.
This paper is pretty fascinating. Basically, right? When you read a research paper, you got to kind of like take the findings and figure out what to do with it. But this creates an automated framework that basically kind of essentially converts the research output from like a passive artifact into an active agent that can go out and kind of act on the knowledge that's gained from the research. It can share the knowledge. It can perform studies like based on the research. It uses the MCP protocol to use it across agents. So it's pretty amazing. People are really like, wow. Should we use AI to write a paper? It's like, well. Whether we use AI to write a paper or not, I can take your human written paper without any, them M dashes, and turn it into an agent.
And thinking about even just some surface level applications, if you consider how we've already played around with bots to represent historical figures or other literary characters, if you're able to allow this level of engagement with the text, it probably leads to greater motivation for students. If we think about it in educational settings, obviously the research implications are pretty profound. If we consider that taking that really static material, making it more dynamic and interactive, allows for other applications that we really haven't thought about before.
And then, finally, everybody's talking about this paper that came primarily out of OpenAI, but, there's a professor from Georgia Tech about why language models hallucinate. And, one of the fundamental conclusions is like, well, they're trying to give you an answer even when it doesn't know. So, they're trying to correct and address that problem. And, I've started to see it a little bit where it won't give you an answer if it doesn't know, but this is kind of a pretty big paper.
Yeah. And really interesting the way it analyzes the training data and reward specifications so that it allows for hallucinations because of the way they're rewarding answers, really confident answers. What we're also seeing is a development of addressing hallucinations in a way that most people still kind of dismiss AI as just hallucinating. It's not reliable. I think at the stage now when you're thinking about really a fine-tuned model that is able to incorporate some of these control mechanisms, it's really not hallucinating or making errors at a greater rate than you might find in a lot of other of your colleagues' work that they're doing. And it's getting to the point now that it's becoming very reliable in different ways. And so it's still distinct in the way it might be applied, but the hallucination problem is certainly not the same one that we saw 6 months ago or a year ago.
And then, just kind of briefly, there's a whole lot of developments in robotics. For me, we could probably someday spend the whole session on robotics. But, the one just cool little shot, and you can find the articles there. UC Berkeley humanoid robot. They played table tennis. It's pretty cool. You should watch the video. It's really impressive. I don't think, in maybe a year, I probably wouldn't want to play table tennis against them.
Now, moving on to AI in schools and looking at some of the new developments and applications and studies that have been conducted. This first one, I'm going to ask Stefan to speak about GSV's report on a forecast for learning and earning. It just came out in the last few days.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of the best things I've read, and now I think there's starting to be a lot of really high quality stuff turned out, right? At first, people put their initial thoughts on paper, but now they're kind of getting refined, and I really like this report because it brings up a lot of the stuff that other people aren't talking about, and it's pretty forward thinking, right? It's talking about, oh, well, we've been talking about, even in this weekly podcast about all the mental health impacts of robotics and developing friendships with robotics, and it brings that up, right? And it's like this is a here and now issue. This is not something in the future. We have all these kids developing, these relationships with bots, and they don't have to be inappropriate. It's just as struggles the kids will go through. It talks about the employment picture, right, and emerging alternatives to universities. Which we'll talk about in a minute, and other educational establishments and other educational models, and AI kind of becoming operating systems for schools. So I really like how it kind of looks into the future, but not, it's kind of like future. I feel when we talk about AI now, it's future present. And I really encourage you to check this out. I really think that kind of these kind of fundamental structures of education that we've really taken for granted for decades are starting to be shaken.
I think the way I would probably characterize is that when we saw early reactions, they were very strong reactions and kind of opposite reactions. It's either really great or really bad. And now we're getting into more subtle analysis that in this, I like the way that you put this, Stefan, it's future present. And while it seems like that subtle analysis doesn't seem quite as far reaching, it really is because we're talking about that occurring very rapidly and we're talking about actual applications. And so reports like this, I think this is an excellent example of it, where it's thinking about what comes next, and when we have to start thinking about not just whether something's in a class of good or bad, but really how it can be applied, how we would consider it being manifested in the relationships with students and with their interaction with the technology is going to be.
Yeah, because I should have mentioned it. It starts with kind of the AI is ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? It's point try to make, right? It's like it's in the Google. It's just there, right? It's not something they go get to anymore. This report I haven't had a chance to read, but it's received a lot of positive reviews. AI in the future of education, disruptions, dilemmas, and directions. It's a free report that you can download. So it's the last one. It's a free report you can download from UNESCO, where they've asked people to write. On a lot of topics, right, that, we commonly cover in education, including, education reform, how we're using it in education, all these types of things. So I encourage you to check it out. It's kind of a good primer. The one thing you have to watch is stuff gets dated fast, right? Like, so, there's an article and it has a 2025 reference. It says, well, all the AI's in English. It's like, well, it's just not true anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
we have entire models, I think it was like Saudi Arabia or one of the Gulf countries just
UAE just came out
yeah,
with
the
one. Yeah.
UAE, right? Just
Yeah.
just released their own model, right? So, and there, there's data sets of like Chinese characters floating around that you can use. So, and it's not to be critical, but just like when you read any of this, it's like you gotta kind of keep in mind the changes are happening.
And going back to that other example of the agentic kind of interaction with papers, I think
Yeah,
what's really interesting about that is imagine what we're able to do with reports going forward. It's not going to be just the static report. If you
right,
have that report that's turned into a bot or an agent that you can interact with that's constantly updating and verifying sources, imagine how much more dynamic our interaction with those reports will be. And I think that's something it'll be interesting to see when somebody does that for the first time and builds that out. It would be a great way to provide a resource that continually updates and is able to, and even if the main ideas are fairly static, it'll update with research to be able to make sure that it's not overly dated.
right. I just titled it AI and challenges maybe for schools. Maybe I could have added that word in there. I wasn't really sure what to title it, but it's basically about OpenAI, launching this certification of program. And if you just flip on the next
Yeah.
slide, they call it expanding economic opportunity with AI. But basically, they've had this I forget what they call it, but they've had this like AI Academy basically where you can go in and learn about AI, and I guess like 2 million people have used it. But what's coming out now, and it's going to be coming out now in 2026, is they've built relationships with employers who want people to learn particular kind of AI skills. And you're going to learn this from AI. They're like, well, yeah, the AI is going to teach you, right? And you're going to learn this from the AI. And once they have this, you're going to have this certificate that say like ties you to some kind of job that Walmart's right interested in. That doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but we really see a direct, right, credentialing of like, if you learn this, there's a good chance you will get this job, right? And that's something obviously, universities really can't provide. And, we're starting to see that crack a little bit. So this could have dramatic implications because it's not just AI, right? Like, I mean, Google figured out how to fold like, the predictive protein structure of like, how many millions, 100 million proteins. I bet they could teach biology, right? So, this could expand like pretty fast if this works. It's not going to be limited to teaching people about AI.
I think that's a really important point. And when you think about, maybe go back to when we were talking about Anthropic finding ways to keep you in their environment.
Right.
OpenAI is doing this in ways that if you look at what's happened over the last year, where they had OpenAI Academy and they're able to incorporate some educational components and some content, then they added study mode, and now they have credentialing that is verified through study mode. So it's not just that they're providing it and you have to go outside of ChatGPT, you're actually doing it through ChatGPT to be able to demonstrate that you've mastered certain materials, that you have that understanding you have some AI fluency, and you'll get credentialed from it. And if that, with the partnerships with some of these businesses, not necessarily lead to a job, but certainly give you a leg up. And if those jobs or those employers are saying this is a necessary condition to apply with our company, then it just gets that many more people that are regularly using ChatGPT. And if you have a student that's thinking about how do I get credentialed, it used to be an undergraduate degree, and now there are going to be a lot of questions about what are the credentials that I really need to get that job. And as more employers are buying into what OpenAI is offering or what other platforms are going to be offering, you're going to see students starting to pull away a little bit more. So I think there are a lot of challenges here. I don't think you titled that incorrectly at all, Stefan. I don't think it's challenges for schools. It's AI challenging schools
Right.
in terms of what the actual product is and what it is that what schools are trying to provide.
And of course, we'll end on, some challenges and, controversies. Some of these are similar to what we've been talking about, or maybe even the same, but they continue to expand, on jobs. It's kind of sad in a way. I think this was announced on Labor Day, right? The Salesforce CEO is like, hey, we have 4,000 less employees because the AI can perform basic customer service, which it can. I mean, the research shows that overall satisfaction is higher than with human customer service. So especially if you build in the workforce properly. But it's just like we've reached this strange moment in history where like it's like companies are proud to announce layoffs, right? Most companies in the past they'd announce it on Friday, or they're like, oh, we tried to avoid this thing, or we gave, we this how we take care of employees. We hope to have them back as business improves, right? But now they're like, hey, this is exciting. I just eliminated the need for 4,000
We
people.
just don't need them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we can see like, in media entertainment, I put that next, but it can be kind of related, right? Like people in the arts are worried, like theater, or not theater, but people are, actors and, the studios are going to be replaced by AI. And we see OpenAI backing Critters, right? To show that generative AI can deliver on the big screen, that, it can produce this, which, it's kind of impressive technology, but it's probably going to have some employment implications. And this one I found just actually when I was finishing putting the this together was media and entertainment maybe goes to jobs, goes a little bit strange. Like somebody's going to generate 1 million AI podcasts. And then, they basically what they say, if you only like a very small number of people watch these, they'll make money. And then they said at the end, we believe that in the near future, half the people, that says people on the planet will be AI. And we are a company bringing those people to life. So the reason I put this in this section was like, wow. I mean, that's quite a statement, right? It kind of goes back, reminds me of Mark Zuckerberg saying everyone needs 15 friends and we only have seven or whatever. And so we're going to get eight AI. So, this is kind of commercial, but this just being flooded, on, and they might flood out our podcast. We're not going to be able to make 1 million of these, right? So, there's kind of that angle, but it's the other thing is just like, they're just straight up calling them people.
Yeah. And pretty astonishing to see the development. I mean, it's if you look at the comparison of traditional media against podcasting, there's already this huge change in terms of product loss of the need for production staff and production costs. And now, if you can automate it even further, yeah, Stefan, I don't think we stand a chance against the AI podcasters that are coming up. So enjoy this episode while you can.
And there's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff related to mental health and personal relationships. This is the woman in love with AI companions. I vowed to my chatbot that I wouldn't leave him. And the one thing though that I thought of after I put this together was like, well, why am I putting this in a mental health category? Why should we assume that people have relations with chatbots? There's some mental health issue. I think it's something really to think about, right? I think at least in most quarters we've kind of learn not to criticize people's personal choices, right? In those regards. So, this brings up all kind of issues related to that, but there's a lot more coming out about people in relationships with chatbots.
And when we're talking about a loneliness epidemic
Yeah.
and we're worried about lack of human interaction, if the chatbots are becoming even developing a better facility for interacting and developing relationships with people, then we really do have to worry about what that means for human interaction and for loneliness primarily for our students. For adults, they can kind of figure out what they'd like to be able to do, but for young people, they need to understand what human connection is about. And maybe the other aspect of this, and I was talking with some colleagues about this recently, is that for them to be successful in an AI world, they need to be able to interact with more than just bots, and they need to be able to collaborate. And collaborating with other humans is really important. You can't do that if you don't have the interpersonal skills. So the real worry for me here is primarily for young people, for our students, and to think about what that means for them to develop that kind of a personal attachment. And the worry that it's coming at the cost of personal attachments to other people.
This was just another one quickly. There's other article, I hate my AI friend, right? So it's just kind of these normal reactions that you have to relationships.
I think we're going to see a lot more of this, obviously long term, but I think in the short term, there's going to be a real kind of a groundswell of reaction, and probably even a lot more of interactions between students and companion bots or chat bots, and thinking about them as companions, to think about them for personal relationships. And this is something we really need to grapple with as educators. There are no easy answers. As I was talking with a group of colleagues earlier today, if we're worried about this and you think that one of the things you should do is to be able to tell a sign of digital dependence, how are you going to distinguish this type of digital dependence versus any other type of digital dependence our students have? Every student on campus, every faculty member, every staff member is constantly on their phone, they're on their laptop, they're digitally dependent in so many areas. It's going to be very hard to identify when students are digitally dependent upon chatbots, unless you are seeing what exactly they're doing. And certainly on a college campus, we're not going to see that at that level. We're not going to have that access. So that rounds out today's update, this week's update. We look forward to coming back next week with more discussions on these topics, as well as anything else that comes out from the big companies or research in education and AI.
I think we need a week of kind of dull developments and And then maybe some great things that AI did, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
that's not going to
change the
happen. I
title.
don't
No,
think we're going to
probably
have a
not.
dull week.
All right.
All right.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Stefan.
Talk to you
Take
later.
care,
Yep.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.